All right, today we're going to decode an invisible blueprint, one that shapes your reality every single day. We're talking about language, and not just the words you speak, but the hidden grammar that structures how you think, how you feel, and even how our entire society works. So, let me ask you something right off the bat. Do you think in English or Spanish or Chinese, or do those languages think through you? Is the very tool you're using for reason actually boxing it in? Okay, so let's zoom in and start at the individual level. There's this theory called linguistic relativity, the idea that language shapes thought. And honestly, the real-world examples are absolutely mind-bending. Get this. Take something simple, like a bridge. In German, the word for bridge, Brücke, is feminine. So when you ask German speakers to describe a bridge, they use words like elegant, slender, beautiful. But in Spanish, the word puente is masculine. And what do Spanish speakers say? They describe bridges as strong, sturdy, powerful. It's the exact same object, but a completely different reality, all because of a little bit of grammar. And it gets even crazier when we talk about events. In English, we tend to focus on who did it. He broke the vase. But in languages like Spanish or Japanese, you're much more likely to hear something like, the vase broke? See the difference? That tiny grammatical shift takes the focus off the person. And studies show this has real-world consequences, influencing how we remember things and even how eyewitnesses assign blame in a courtroom. And these examples are just everywhere. In Mandarin, you don't really have to change verbs for tense, which might make you focus more on the action itself instead of when it happened. Or how about this? An Aboriginal community in Australia doesn't use left and right. They use cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. Can you imagine having a compass just built into your brain? Even how we see color changes, Russian has two distinct words for light and dark blue, and because of that, its speakers are measurably faster at telling them apart. Okay, so language is clearly a kind of operating system for our individual minds. But here's the really big leap. What if whole societies have a language too? A kind of hidden grammar made of shared values, tensions, and emotions that dictates our collective behavior on a massive scale. So let's dive into that. Let's really unpack this idea of a societal grammar. To do it, we're going to use this really powerful framework for decoding the deep structures that guide entire nations. It's from something called the Brain Kinematics Model. First things first, we've got to get our heads around a really key idea. We usually see big societal tensions, like tradition versus innovation, as problems we need to solve. But what if they're not bugs in the system? What if they're features? Every healthy, complex society is defined by these ongoing paradoxes. The real question isn't how to solve them, but how to manage them. This framework gives us a basic grammar to work with, what it calls the OVC triangle. You can think of it like this. Objects are the nouns of a society, the things it values and protects, like the individual or the community. Verbs are its go-to actions, things like resist, innovate, or regulate. And concepts? Well, those are the big why, the powerful ideas like liberty, purity, or progress that give it all meaning. But it's not all about neat little grammatical rules, is it? Logic and grammar alone don't drive the story. What really steers a society, especially when it's under pressure, isn't some rational debate. It's the powerful underlying current of collective emotion. And this right here, this is the absolute core engine of the whole model. The argument is that when a society has to make a choice, it's not logic that wins the day. It's the dominant emotional weight of that moment that pushes the entire system one way or the other. And these emotions, they have really predictable jobs. A high dose of collective fear, that leads a society to tighten its boundaries, to increase control. A lot of hope, that encourages exploration and new ideas. And a heavy weight of anger, that mobilizes the population for a fast, decisive fight. Okay, let's put this into practice. Let's make it real. A central paradox in North America is this constant tension between freedom and safety. The freedom side values individual autonomy and resists authority, all under that big concept of liberty. The safety side values the collective good and wants to regulate behavior for the sake of security. The whole society is constantly swaying between these two, often steered by which emotion, fear or anger, is heavier at any given time. Now, what's so powerful about this model is you can apply it anywhere. Let's switch contexts completely to Iran. There, a core paradox is the tension between sacred authority and empirical authority. One side's main goal is to guard the sacred order, framed by the concept of purity. The other side champions individual progress, using actions like question and experiment, all under the banner of realism. Same model, totally different societal grammar.
So we've seen how these tensions are supposed to work. But what happens when a society starts to lose its ability to manage them? When that back and forth stops and things threaten to just break?
And this is where something we're all familiar with comes into play: the media. Now, according to this model, media doesn't actually invent these underlying paradoxes. What it does is act like a giant gain knob on an amplifier, turning up the volume on the emotional weights that are already there in the population. And what happens when you turn up that gain? Well, it's scarily predictable. When media amplifies fear, a society gets more controlling. When it cranks up the anger, polarization speeds way up. And if it amplifies shame or humiliation, people's identities can become unstable, volatile, and start looking for a target. And all of this leads to a critical point, a moment of rupture. It's got a name: straight front formation. This is the breaking point. It's that moment when a really complex, messy tension collapses into a simple binary, us versus them fight. You can literally map the path to this breakdown. It's almost like a recipe for disaster. Step 1, you start with a normal, complex paradox. Step 2, emotional amplification, usually through media, pumps a ton of energy into one side of that tension until the other side feels like its very existence is threatened. And finally, step 3, the system fractures. All the nuance disappears, and all you have left are two opposing lines drawn in the sand. Okay, that sounds pretty bleak, I know, but here's the good news. It's not inevitable. Understanding how a system breaks is actually the first step to making it more resilient. So, how do healthy societies manage to avoid this kind of collapse? And this really gets us to the single most important idea in this whole explainer. The goal is not to win the argument. It's not to eliminate the paradox. The goal is to build a societal container that's strong enough to hold that tension productively forever. So what do these containers actually look like? Well, they're things like domain separation, where you basically agree that tradition is in charge in this area of life and modernity is in charge over there. Or time separation, where you switch your focus. You have a season for stability and then a season for change. And maybe most importantly, repair loops. These are rituals and institutions designed for one specific purpose: to heal breaches and rebuild trust when things go wrong. So I want to leave you with this one powerful idea that just sums it all up. Healthy societies don't resolve their paradoxes, they continuously metabolize them. Just like a healthy body, they have systems to constantly process stress and tension, turning what could be poison into strength and adaptation. So my final question is for you. Now that you can see this invisible blueprint, this grammar of how we think and how our societies function, how does it change the way you see the conflicts all around you? From a family argument to the biggest debates on the news, what hidden paradoxes and what emotional weights can you see at play now?